I voted for this nominee out of committee, and I will vote for this nominee on the floor of the United States Senate. He's supremely qualified for this position. I come to the floor not to repeat what a lot of other people have said about this nominee, but the process that was connected with arranging the vote for this nominee. Basically, I want to speak about the needless shenanigans that have gone on before we get to this point where we vote at 2 o'clock. Today's nominee for the D.C. Circuit was voted out of committee 1 week ago on May the 16th, a unanimous vote of 18-0. He was placed on the executive calendar 3 days ago, on Monday, May the 20th. 1 day later, on May 21st, the Republicans cleared this nominee to have an up or down vote when we return from the Memorial Day recess. But the majority leader was not content to take a yes for an answer. 1 day after this nominee was placed on the executive calendar, and after Republicans agreed to an up or down vote, the majority leader chose to file cloture. Why file cloture? Why would the majority leader do that on a nominee that the minority party, the Republicans, were ready and willing to vote on, backed up by the fact that every Republican on the committee voted for this nominee? There's only one plausible answer. That is part of the majority's attempt to create a mere appearance of obstruction where no obstruction ever existed. It's pure nonsense. It is a transparent attempt to manufacture a crisis that doesn't exist. The fact of the matter is that there is no obstruction, and particularly no obstruction on this nominee, and the other side knew it before they filed cloture. This morning in his opening remarks, the majority leader tried to argue that he has had to file cloture 58 times. But what the majority leader did this week illustrates precisely what the majority leader is trying to do. And that happens to fit into the majority's playbook, the playbook of the Democrat majority. File cloture for no apparent reason, none whatsoever, and then immediately turn around and claim, see, we had to file cloture. The fact of the matter is that we're confirming the president's nominee, all nominees, at a near record pace. After today, the Senate will have confirmed 193 lower court nominees. We've defeated only 2. That's 193-2, which happens to be in baseball a 990 batting average. And anybody would agree that that's an outstanding record. Who can complain about 99%? After today, this year alone, the first year of the president's second term, the Senate will have confirmed 22 judicial nominees. Now let's compare that when there was a Democrat Congress and the previous president in the first year of his second term, that of President Bush. So in this same period of time in 2005, the Senate had only confirmed 4 nominees. So that's a record of 22 the first year of this president's second term compared to only 4 for the first year of President Bush's second term. If we were treating the president in the same way the Senate Democrats treated President Bush in 2005, we wouldn't be confirming 22 nominees. We'd be confirming only 4. But we have these needless shenanigans going on anyway. Based on that record, what can the president or the Senate Democrats possibly complain about? The bottom line is that they can't complain, or at least shouldn't complain, And that's based not upon rhetoric, but based on that record of 22 so far this year and 197 versus only 2 disapprovals. And of course, because the record's so good, the other side needs to manufacture a crisis. That's why the other side filed cloture on this nomination one day, just one day after it appeared on the executive calendar. Yesterday, when the majority leader was pressed on why he chose to file cloture one single day after his nomination appeared on the executive calendar, he pointed to the fact that the nominee was first nominated in the year 2012. But apparently what the majority leader has been unaware of, that the chairman of the committee, the Judiciary Committee, made no effort to schedule a hearing on this nominee until late last year. Apparently the majority leader was unaware that by January of this year, we learned the nominee was potentially involved in the quid pro quo of Mr. Perez, the president's nominee for labor secretary, orchestrated between the Department of Justice and the city of St. Paul. And you may remember I spoke on this issue last week regarding the deal Mr. Perez struck, where he agreed the department would decline 2 false claims cases in exchange for the city of St. Paul withdrawing a case from the Supreme Court. I'm not going to go into those details again, but that is a very serious issue. The department, as it turns out, Mr. Perez in particular, bartered away a case worth about $200 million of taxpayers' dollars to come back into the federal treasury under the False Claims Act. Having that case withdrawn is a pretty serious matter. As it turns out, the nominee before us today happened to be the lawyer in the Solicitor General's office who handled the case for Mr. Perez, desperately wanted withdrawn from the Supreme Court. So as you would expect any member of the Senate, particularly the responsibility of the minority, our side needed to know what the nominee knew about the quid pro quo and what Mr. Perez told the committee about that deal. We needed the documents about this issue, and we needed to speak with the witnesses involved. But the department was desperate to keep those documents from Congress. They were desperate to keep the witnesses from being involved and interviewed. The bottom line is that the Department of Justice dragged its feet for months. Now, if the Department of Justice had turned over those documents and made witnesses available way back when we asked for them, the hearing for this nominee could have been one of the first that we had this year. But instead, the Department of Justice chose to try their best to keep Congress from getting to the bottom of that quid pro quo, and frankly, Mr. Perez's involvement in that matter. So if the majority wishes to complain about the nominee having his hearing in April rather than February, they should just pick up the phone and call those in charge at the Department of Justice. How come you didn't give Congress that information that they needed? So it wasn't the Senate Republicans who withheld the documents. It was this Department of Justice. It wasn't Senate Republicans who held up the nominee's hearing. It was the Department of Justice. The bottom line is that the Senate is processing the president's nominees exceptionally fairly. I don't repeat those statistics because I've gone through them, this speech and many speeches. This president is being treated much more fairly than Senate Democrats treated President Bush's in 2005. The fact of the matter is this: filing cloture on this nominee that probably will pass unanimously was nothing but a transparent attempt to create the appearance of obstruction. As I said, I intend to support this nominee, just as I did in committee, and I encourage my colleagues to support the nomination as well. But as we move forward on these nominees, I wish we could stop these needless shenanigans. I wish the other side would stop shedding those crocodile tears that the statistics of approval by this Senate of judicial nominees of 197 to 2 is no justification for any crocodile tears whatsoever. I yield the floor.